The poison tasted like plum wine and broken promises. I could feel it burning through my veins as I collapsed onto the cold marble floor of Jade Harmony Palace, my silk robes pooling around me like spilled blood. The golden phoenix embroidered on my chest, symbol of my rank as empress, seemed to mock me now. What kind of phoenix dies choking on lies? Through blurring vision I saw her standing in the doorway. Noble consort Shinqingi, draped in pale pink silk that made her look innocent as morning dew. Her lips curved into the gentlest smile, the kind that had fooled everyone in this palace for 15 years. "Your Majesty looks unwell," she whispered, her voice honey-sweet with false concern. "Perhaps you shouldn't have confronted His Majesty so emotionally. You know how fragile your heart has always been." Fragile. That word again. The word she'd used to cage me, to excuse every cruelty, every stolen moment with my husband, every privilege she'd claimed that should have been mine. But it wasn't my heart that was broken. It was my entire world. 3 hours ago I had discovered the truth that shattered me. The son I had raised for 15 years. Crown Prince Wei, heir to the dragon throne, the boy I had loved with every breath in my body, was not mine. He was hers. And my real son? The child I had carried for 9 months. The baby I had felt kick beneath my heart, the soul that was half of mine? He had been taken from me the night he was born and given to a disgraced concubine to raise. He grew up in the servants' quarters, forbidden from even speaking my name. While I sang lullabies to her son, mine learned to sleep in stables and bow to the boy who stole his birthright. When I confronted the emperor, I expected shock. Justice. Instead, Zhao Yunshao had looked at me with those cold, ancient eyes and said, "I have always known Yin. But Consort Shin's health is delicate." The revelation would have destroyed her. For the harmony of the imperial family, this secret was necessary. Necessary. He had sacrificed our son, his true heir, for the comfort of his concubine. Now as the poison dragged me toward darkness, I understood. This had always been her plan. She had whispered in his ear for 15 years, played the victim so perfectly that even when the truth came out, he chose her fragile tears over my shattered heart. "The physician will say it was grief," Consort Shin murmured, kneeling beside me with theatrical concern. Her sleeve brushed my face and I smelled the jasmine perfume she always wore. Poor Empress Li, unable to bear the truth about Crown Prince Wei's origins. "They'll say you took your own life rather than face the shame." I wanted to scream. To claw at her lying face. To tell someone, anyone, what she had done. But my tongue was lead. My lungs were drowning. The last thing I saw was her perfect porcelain face, not a trace of guilt in those doe eyes. The last thing I heard was my own heart breaking one final time. And then, nothing. No, not nothing. I opened my eyes to sunlight. Warm, golden morning light streaming through silk curtains embroidered with phoenixes. I knew these curtains. I had chosen them myself when I first became empress, so young and so foolishly in love. My hands flew to my throat. Smooth. Unburned. No trace of poison. I sat up and the room spun. This was Jade Harmony Palace, but different. Younger. The furniture was arranged the way it had been 15 years ago, before I'd requested the rosewood screens, before I'd added the bookshelves, before I'd turned this place into the home where I'd raised a son who was never mine. A maid entered carrying a basin of water. She was young, too young. Little Pinger, who had been my head attendant but who had died of fever 8 years ago. "Your Majesty," she gasped, rushing forward. "You're awake. We were so worried, you collapsed during last night's banquet. The physicians said it was exhaustion from the birth." The birth. My hands moved to my stomach, flat beneath the sleeping robes. But I could feel it, the strange hollow ache of a body that had just carried life. The tender soreness. The phantom weight. The baby, I whispered, my voice hoarse with emotions I didn't understand yet. "Where is my son?" Pinger smiled brightly, the innocent smile of someone who didn't know she was part of a nightmare. "Crown Prince Wei is sleeping soundly in the nursery, Your Majesty. The wet nurse says he barely cries. Such a peaceful child. Noble Consort Shin sent lotus flower soup for your recovery. Wasn't that kind of her? Lotus flower soup. In my previous life I had drunk it gratefully, touched by her thoughtfulness. I hadn't known it contained herbs to cloud my mind, to make me too drowsy to notice when they took my real son away and replaced him with hers. The memories crashed over me like a tidal wave. I was back. Somehow, impossibly, I had returned to the beginning. To the day after I gave birth. The day they stole everything from me. But this time I knew. This time I would not be the gentle, foolish empress who loved too much and questioned too little. This time I would be the storm that tore down every lie in this palace. My son, my real son, was somewhere in this palace, probably already in Consortion's chambers, being prepared for the swap. In my original life, I hadn't seen my baby's face clearly through the exhaustion and drugged soup. I had held him for mere moments before they took him away to rest. But I remembered my real son's eyes from much later, when I finally met him as a young man. Dark and deep, with a small birthmark beneath his left ear shaped like a crescent moon. Eyes that had looked at me with such desperate longing when I, thinking him a stranger, had turned away. I would not turn away this time. Pinga, I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane in my chest. Bring me my robes. I wish to see my son in the nursery. Now. She blinked, surprised. But your majesty, the physician said you must rest. Now. Something in my tone made her bow quickly and hurry out. Good. In my previous life I had been too gentle, too accommodating. I had smiled when I wanted to scream and bowed when I should have burned the world down. I would not make that mistake again. As I stood on shaking legs, I caught my reflection in the bronze mirror. I was young again. Just 18, with clear skin and eyes that hadn't yet learned what betrayal looked like. But behind those youthful eyes, I carried 33 years of memories, 15 years of lies, and the bitter taste of poison on my tongue. They thought they had buried me. They didn't know they had planted a dragon. Thank you for joining us today. Tell me where you're watching from and what the weather's like today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. It really helps this channel grow and keeps the stories coming. The nursery was warm, filled with the sweet scent of sandalwood incense meant to ward off evil spirits. How ironic. The real evil in this palace didn't fear incense. It wore silk robes and smiled with poisoned lips. 2 cribs stood side by side, separated by a painted screen. Even now, even in this moment, they had positioned everything for the swap. I moved toward the first crib, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might shatter my ribs. The baby inside slept peacefully, his tiny fists curled against his chest. He had a round face, soft features, and when I leaned close I saw it, or rather I didn't see it. No crescent-shaped birthmark beneath his left ear. This was not my son. This was the boy I had loved for 15 years in my previous life. The boy I had taught to read, whose nightmares I had soothed, whose first steps I had celebrated. Crown Prince Wei. Consort Shin's biological child. Something twisted in my chest. Even knowing the truth, even carrying the weight of betrayal, I couldn't help but remember the child he had been to me. But love built on lies was just another form of poison. I moved to the second crib, behind the screen where they thought I wouldn't look. And there he was. My son had the same tiny fists, the same rosebud mouth, but his features were different. Sharper even in infancy. More defined. He had my nose, my chin. And when I gently turned his small head, there it was. The crescent moon birthmark beneath his left ear, exactly as I remembered. This was Zhao Qin. My real son. The boy who would grow up despised and discarded. The young man who would die in battle defending an empire that had stolen everything from him. Not this time. I reached into the crib and lifted him carefully, my hands trembling. He was warm and perfect in mine. In my previous life, I had only held him for moments before the drugged soup made me too weak to protest when they took him away. I had believed their lies that he needed special care, that the wet nurse would bring him back soon. They never did. But I held him now, and something fierce and ancient awakened in my chest. This was my child. My blood. My future. And I would burn this entire palace to ashes before I let anyone take him from me again. Your Majesty? I turned to find the wet nurse standing in the doorway, her face pale. Behind her, I could see shadows moving. More servants, probably sent by Consort Shin to complete the swap while I was supposed to be resting in my drugged stupor. This is my son, I said clearly, holding Zhao Qin close. Crown Prince Zhao Qin, first son of the Empress, rightful heir to the dragon throne. The wet nurse's eyes widened with panic. Your Majesty, you're confused. The exhaustion from the birth, you should be resting. Let me take the prince back to his crib. I am not confused. My voice could have frozen the summer air. And you will not touch my son. I walked past her, Zhao Qin secure in my arms, and moved toward the other crib. The false prince. No, I couldn't think of him that way. He was innocent in this. He was just a baby who had no choice in his mother's schemes. This child, I said, looking at the wet nurse with eyes that had seen my own death, belongs to noble consort Shin Chingy. I'm sure she's quite worried about him. Please have him taken to her quarters immediately. The wet nurse fell to her knees, her face white with terror. Your Majesty, please, I don't understand. The physician said you needed to rest. Noble consort Shin sent medicine. The medicine that would make me forget my own child's face? I stepped closer and she flinched. Good. Let them all fear what I had become. The medicine that would let you complete the swap while I slept? Silence fell like a blade. The wet nurse's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. Behind her, the other servants had frozen in the doorway, their faces masks of shock and dawning horror. They had expected a gentle, trusting empress. They had expected the girl I used to be. They were meeting the woman I had died to become. I will ask you once, I said softly, dangerously. Who gave you your orders? Who told you to switch these children? The wet nurse's eyes darted toward the door, calculating. In my previous life I had been too naive to see these calculations, these tiny betrayals. Now I saw everything with brutal clarity. Your Majesty, this servant would never, she began, her voice trembling with false innocence. Lies bore me. I adjusted Zhao Qin in my arms, feeling his small warmth against my heart. You have 10 seconds to tell me the truth, or I will have you and everyone in this room executed for conspiracy against the imperial heir. 2. 3. I watched her face crumble, watched the moment she realized the gentle empress was gone. By the count of 7 she was sobbing, forehead pressed to the floor. Noble consort Shin, she gasped. She said it was for the good of the empire. That your Majesty's son was born under inauspicious stars, that he would bring calamity. She said switching them would protect both children, that your Majesty would never know, that it was an act of mercy. Mercy. The word tasted like ash. How much did she pay you for this mercy? The wet nurse's silence was answer enough. I looked at the other servants clustered in the doorway. All of you on your knees. They dropped like stones, pressing their foreheads to the polished floor. 7 servants, 7 conspirators in the theft of my son's identity. In my previous life they had succeeded. Some had risen to higher positions in consort Shin's household. Others had taken their blood money and lived comfortable lives while my real son suffered in the servants' quarters. You will each write a confession, I said, my voice carrying the weight of both lives I had lived. Every detail, every payment, every instruction noble consort Shin gave you. You will sign these confessions with your fingerprints in red ink, and you will present them to me before sunset. Your Majesty, please, one of the younger maids sobbed. We were only following orders. Noble consort Shin said you had approved. Then you are either liars or fools. Neither is acceptable in my service. I looked at each face, memorizing them. You have until sunset. After that, your families will share your punishment. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Harsh perhaps, but I had learned harshness in my death. I had learned that gentleness in a palace of vipers only got you poisoned. I turned to leave, then paused. And someone fetch Grand Physician Zhao. Tell him the Empress requires his immediate presence. Tell him it's a matter concerning the Crown Prince's health. As I swept from the nursery with Zhao Qin in my arms, I heard the wet nurse's broken weeping behind me. I felt nothing. My capacity for mercy had died with me in that other life. The corridors of Jade Harmony Palace seemed different now, brighter, sharper, as if I were seeing them with new eyes. Servants bowed as I passed, their faces showing surprise at seeing me out of bed so soon after giving birth. Let them be surprised. Let the whole palace whisper about the Empress who rose too quickly, who held her son too tightly, who looked at everyone as if she could see their souls. I had earned that sight with death and rebirth. In my chambers, I dismissed everyone except Pinger, who watched me with worried, confused eyes. Sweet Pinger, who had been loyal until the day she died. She deserved to know the truth. Pinger, I said, settling into the cushioned chair with Zhao Qin still in my arms. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Can you do that? She knelt beside me, her young face earnest. Of course, Your Majesty. Always. Noble consort Shin attempted to switch my son with hers. She drugged the lotus soup she sent, planning to complete the swap while I slept. The wet nurse and 6 other servants were part of the conspiracy. Pinger's face went white, then red with fury. That snake. That vicious, treacherous. She caught herself remembering who she was addressing. Your Majesty, forgive this servant's outburst. Don't. I looked at her with something almost like affection. Your anger is honest. I need honest people around me now. Everyone else in this palace wears masks. What will you do? Pinger whispered. If you accuse noble consort Shen, she'll cry and play victim. His Majesty always. She stopped, horrified at her own boldness. His Majesty always believes her tears, I finished. I know. Which is why I won't accuse her directly. Not yet. I had learned this lesson in Blood and Poison. The Emperor loved Consort Shin's fragility, her delicate beauty, her helpless tears. If I confronted her openly, he would take her side, just as he had in my previous life when I discovered the truth. He would call me jealous, paranoid, cruel to attack a woman who had only been trying to help. No. This time required strategy. This time required patience. This time I would let Consort Shin destroy herself. Your Majesty? Pinger's voice was small. Why would she do this? What could she gain? I looked down at Zhao Qin, who had started to fuss slightly, tiny fists waving. Everything, I said softly. Her son raised as crown prince with all the power and privilege that brings. My son raised in obscurity, unable to challenge his brother's claim. And me, none the wiser, pouring all my love and energy into raising her child as the future emperor. It's monstrous, Pinger breathed. It's survival. I had 15 years to understand Consort Shin's logic. In this palace you're either predator or prey. She chose not to be prey. Then what are you, Your Majesty? I met her eyes and I saw her flinch at whatever she saw in mine. I'm the storm that drowns them all. Grand Physician Zhao arrived within the hour, his elderly face creased with concern. He had served 3 emperors and had a reputation for unshakable integrity. In my previous life, he had been one of the few who had treated me with genuine respect even after my fall from grace. Your Majesty, he bowed deeply. I came as quickly as I could. What concerns you about the Crown Prince? I gestured for him to sit. Physician Zhao, you've served this palace for 40 years. You delivered me when I was born. You delivered my son last night. I trust you more than almost anyone in this world. His weathered face showed surprise at my intensity. Your Majesty honors this old servant. I need you to examine my son. Thoroughly. And I need you to record every distinguishing mark, every feature, every detail that makes him unique. Can you do this? He studied me for a long moment, his ancient eyes sharp. Your Majesty fears. Substitution? Smart man. He had survived 40 years in this palace by knowing when to ask questions and when to simply obey. I fear many things, Physician Zhao. I would like this examination documented, witnessed and sealed with both our signatures. Today. Now. He nodded slowly. This servant understands. I watched as he examined Zhao Qin with meticulous care, noting the crescent birthmark, the spacing of his toes, a small strawberry mark on his left shoulder blade, the exact pattern of hair whorls on his head. Details I had never known in my previous life because I had been too drugged and trusting to ask for them. The Crown Prince is healthy and strong, Physician Zhao announced after an hour of careful work. All his features are recorded here. He held up a detailed scroll, written in his precise medical script. Would Your Majesty like this sealed and stored? Yes. In the Imperial Archives under your personal seal and mine. I want copies made, 3 of them. 1 for your personal records, 1 for the archives and 1 to be kept in my private chambers. His eyes flickered with understanding. He was creating a legal record that could never be disputed or altered. This servant will see it done immediately. One more thing, I said as he prepared to leave. The lotus soup that noble Consort Shin sent me, I would like you to analyze it. Discreetly. Grand Physician Zhao's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand tighten on his medicine box. Your Majesty suspects contamination? I suspect thoughtfulness, I said carefully. Consort Shin has always been so concerned with my health. I simply want to ensure her remedies are appropriate for a new mother. The old physician bowed low. This servant will examine the soup personally. The results will be delivered to Your Majesty's eyes only. After he left, I allowed myself to breathe. The first moves were made. Zhao Chen's identity was legally documented. The servants would provide written confessions of the conspiracy. And soon I would have proof that Consort Shen had drugged me. But I couldn't present this evidence to the emperor yet. Not directly. He would find reasons to dismiss it, to protect his delicate concubine. I knew him too well, had loved him too much in my previous life not to understand exactly how his mind worked. Zhao Yunxiao valued harmony above truth. He valued peace above justice. He would sacrifice anything, even his own son, to maintain the careful balance of his household. So I would have to force his hand. I would have to make it impossible for him to ignore what Consort Shen had done. I would have to play this game better than I had played it before. Pinger entered quietly. Your Majesty, noble Consort Shen requests an audience. She says she's concerned about your health and wishes to visit. Of course she did. She would want to see if her plot had succeeded, if her son was sleeping in the crib meant for mine. She would come with tears and soft words and poisoned sympathy. Tell her, I said slowly, savoring the words, that the Empress is resting with Crown Prince Zhao Chen and cannot receive visitors. But I appreciate her sisterly concern. Pinger's eyes widened as she caught the emphasis on my son's name. Yes, Your Majesty. I could almost see it, Consort Shen receiving that message, her perfect face paling. The name. I had used the name. That meant I knew which child was mine. That meant her plot had failed. Let her panic. Let her wonder. Let her make mistakes. In chess, the most dangerous move is often the one your opponent doesn't see coming. Consort Shen thought she knew me. The gentle empress who smiled through everything, who never fought back, who died without even cursing her murderers. She didn't know I had been reborn in fury. She didn't know I remembered everything. And she certainly didn't know that this time, I wasn't playing to survive. I was playing to win. The emperor came to me at dusk. I had been expecting him. Consort Shen would have run to him immediately after receiving my message, tears streaming down her porcelain face, voice trembling with wounded innocence. She would have claimed confusion, misunderstanding, perhaps even hinted that my fragile state after giving birth had made me paranoid and cruel. In my previous life, I had never understood how she manipulated him so perfectly. Now, having died knowing the truth, I saw the pattern clearly. She never accused directly. She only implied, suggested, planted seeds of doubt with her gentle voice and tragic eyes. But I had learned her methods, and I would use them better than she ever could. Zhao Yunxiao entered my chambers with the bearing of an emperor, straight-backed, commanding, his dragon robes sweeping the floor like golden rivers. He was handsome in the way mountains are handsome, cold, distant, carved from something harder than flesh. I had loved him once. Foolishly. Completely. Looking at him now, I felt nothing but ice. Yanmei, he said, his voice measured. Not warm, not cold. Simply, distant. He always said my name like he was reading from an official document. I heard you've been unwell. The physician said you should be resting, yet you insisted on going to the nursery. I wanted to see my son. I kept my voice soft, deferential. Let him think I was still the gentle wife who never questioned him. Surely His Majesty understands a mother's heart? His jaw tightened slightly. Of course. But Consort Shen is quite distressed. She says you've made accusations. Against the servants. Against her. There was the reason for his visit. Not concern for my health. Not joy over our son's birth. He had come to manage me, to smooth over the disruption I had caused to his precious harmony. I made no accusations against noble Consort Shen, I said truthfully. I simply identified which child was mine and which was hers. The wet nurse seemed confused about the arrangements. I clarified them. Her child. The emperor's eyes narrowed. Yanmei, what are you suggesting? I stood slowly, moving to the carved window that overlooked the palace gardens. Zhao Chen slept peacefully in his cradle nearby, watched over by Pinger. The setting sun painted everything gold and red, the colors of fire, of endings, of rebirth. I'm suggesting nothing, Your Majesty. I'm stating facts. I turned to face him and I let him see something in my eyes. Not anger, not yet. Just a terrible, quiet certainty. 2 babies were in the nursery when I arrived. One had the distinctive crescent birthmark beneath his left ear that I glimpsed when I held my son after birth. The other did not. Grand Physician Zhao has examined and documented Crown Prince Zhao Chen's features thoroughly. The records are sealed in the imperial archives. The emperor went very still. I could see his mind working, calculating. He hadn't expected this. In my previous life, I had been too drugged to notice the details, too trusting to demand documentation. He had counted on that same gentle compliance. You had the child examined and documented? His voice was dangerously quiet now. Before even informing me? I informed you now, Your Majesty. A mother should know her own child's face, shouldn't she? I moved closer, close enough to see the gold threading in his collar, close enough to smell the sandalwood incense that clung to his robes. Unless Your Majesty believes I should have waited? Given the servants more time to clarify the arrangements. It was a careful dance, this conversation. I was implying everything without accusing anything. Making him see the trap without showing him the blade. Yen Mei. He reached for my hand and I let him take it, though his touch felt like ice. You've just given birth. The experience is exhausting, sometimes disorienting. Perhaps you're confused. I am not confused. I pulled my hand back gently, respectfully but firmly. I held my son for mere minutes after his birth, Your Majesty, but a mother knows. The crescent birthmark. The shape of his nose. The way he grasped my finger. These details don't change. Consort Shin is in tears, he said, changing tactics. She says you've implied terrible things. That you've frightened the servants, demanded confessions for crimes that were never committed. Her health is delicate, Yen Mei. The stress. Her health is always delicate when it's convenient. The words slipped out before I could stop them, sharp and bitter. The emperor's face darkened. What did you say? I could feel the precipice beneath my feet. In my previous life this was where I had fallen. Speaking too plainly, showing too much anger, giving him reasons to call me jealous and irrational. I had to be smarter this time. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I lowered my eyes, let my voice soften to something fragile. I spoke from exhaustion. You're right, giving birth has left me weary. But I am not confused. I know my son. And if noble Consort Shin is distressed, perhaps it's because she too is tired. We both gave birth within hours of each other. Perhaps she's the one who is disoriented. Beautiful. I had turned his own argument against Consort Shin without actually accusing her of anything. Just a gentle suggestion that maybe she was confused, maybe her delicate health had made her imagine threats that didn't exist. The emperor studied me for a long moment. I could see him weighing options, calculating consequences. Finally, he said, I will speak with the wet nurse and the other servants. If there was genuine confusion, it will be resolved. But Yen Mei, I expect you to apologize to Consort Shin. Whatever happened, or didn't happen, she doesn't deserve to be frightened in her own home. Her own home. Not our home. Not the palace where I was empress. Her home. In that moment, I understood something I had been too blinded by love to see in my previous life. The emperor didn't love Consort Shin more than he loved me. He didn't love either of us. We were pieces on his board, tools to maintain his perfect, harmonious empire. And Consort Shin was simply more useful because she never caused disruptions, never made demands, never disturbed his carefully constructed peace. Of course, Your Majesty, I said softly. I would never want to cause Sister Shin distress. He nodded, satisfied that I had been properly managed. Good. I'll have the physicians send stronger tonics for your recovery. You need rest, Yen Mei. Real rest. Tonics. In my previous life, those tonics had kept me docile and clouded for weeks after giving birth. I had accepted them gratefully, never questioning why I felt so distant and detached, why my memories of those early days were so foggy. Your Majesty is too kind, I murmured. But I've asked Grand Physician Zhao to oversee my care personally. His remedies have always suited me best. Another small rebellion, another boundary drawn. The emperor's eyes flickered with irritation, but he couldn't object without seeming petty. Grand Physician Zhao was beyond reproach. As you wish. He moved toward the door, then paused. Yen Mei, I hope you understand. My concern is for the stability of our family. For the good of the empire. Personal feelings must sometimes be secondary to larger responsibilities. Personal feelings. He meant my maternal instinct, my need to know my own child. Those were merely personal feelings that should bow to his vision of harmony. I understand perfectly, Your Majesty, I said. And I did. More than he could ever know. After he left, I stood trembling, my hands clenched so tightly my nails drew blood from my palms. Pinger rushed to my side, her face pale with worry. Your Majesty, are you? I'm fine. I forced myself to breathe, to release the rage that threatened to consume me. I'm better than fine. I'm learning. Learning what? I looked at her, this girl who would die loyal to me, who deserved to understand the game we were playing. Learning that in this palace, truth doesn't matter. Power matters. And the greatest power comes not from crowns or thrones, but from knowing exactly what everyone wants, and using it against them. The confessions arrived before sunset as I had commanded. 7 scrolls, 7 trembling sets of fingerprints in red ink, 7 detailed accounts of noble consort Shin's instructions. They had written everything, the payments, the timing, the exact words she had used. She had been careful, of course. She had framed it as protection, as mercy, as concern for both children's welfare. But the truth was there, woven between the careful lies. She had orchestrated the swap. She had drugged my soup. She had planned to steal my son's identity and replace him with her own child. I read each confession twice, memorizing every detail. Then I locked them in the hidden compartment of my jewelry box, the one even the Emperor didn't know about. These were insurance but not yet weapons. Using them now would only make me look vindictive, especially after the Emperor's lecture about harmony and Consort Shin's delicate health. But I needed to be patient. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. Grand Physician Zhao returned as the moon rose, his face grave. He bowed low and produced a small vial of dark liquid. Your Majesty, he said quietly. The lotus soup contained valerian root poppy extract, and 3 other herbs known for their sedative properties. The dosage was significant. Not dangerous, but enough to induce deep sleep and considerable memory confusion. Could such a mixture be accidental? Perhaps too much of a restorative tonic. The old physician met my eyes. This servant has practiced medicine for 40 years, Your Majesty. That mixture was deliberate. It was designed to make someone sleep deeply and wake disoriented. It was not designed to heal. I see. I took the vial carefully. More evidence. More insurance. And what would you recommend for someone who had consumed such a mixture? What would counteract its effects? Clarity-inducing herbs. Ginseng. Clear broths. Time and wakefulness. He hesitated. Your Majesty, if you wish to make a formal complaint. I don't. I smiled at his surprise. Not yet. But I appreciate your discretion, Physician Zhao. Your loyalty to the truth means more than you know. After he left, I held the vial up to the lamplight, watching the dark liquid swirl. Proof of attempted drugging. Confessions of conspiracy. Medical documentation of my son's identity. I had everything I needed to destroy Consort Shin. But destruction without strategy was just chaos. And chaos would only give the Emperor an excuse to side with her, to call me hysterical and unstable. I had seen it happen in my previous life. My righteous anger had made me look like the villain while she played the victim with tear-stained perfection. This time would be different. This time I would let her think she had won. I would apologize as the Emperor commanded. I would be gentle and gracious. I would visit her chambers and smile sweetly and call her sister with honey in my voice. And while she relaxed in her victory, while she believed I had been properly subdued, I would be teaching my son everything he needed to know to survive in a world that would try to destroy him. Because that was the other lesson I had learned in death. Patience wasn't weakness. It was the sharpest blade of all. I waited 3 days before visiting Consort Shin. 3 days to let the Emperor believe I had been properly chastened. 3 days to let her stew in uncertainty, wondering if I would actually apologize or if I would come with accusations and fury. 3 days to plan exactly how I would destroy her. On the morning of the 4th day, I dressed in pale blue silk, the color of humility and peace. I wore minimal jewelry, just simple jade earrings and a pearl hairpin. I looked young, soft, almost apologetic. Exactly the image I needed. Pinger helped me arrange my hair in a modest style, her hands gentle but her eyes worried. Your Majesty, are you certain about this? That woman tried to steal your son. She doesn't deserve. She deserves exactly what I'm going to give her, I said softly. Trust me, Pinger. Consort Shin's chambers were in Orchid Pavilion, the second most luxurious residence in the palace after my own. The emperor had spared no expense in decorating it for her. Silk screens painted with cherry blossoms, furniture inlaid with mother-of-pearl incense burners shaped like phoenixes. Everything designed to showcase how precious she was to him. In my previous life I had visited these chambers often, thinking we were friends. Thinking her gentle smiles meant sisterhood. I had been so blind. Her attendants announced my arrival with barely concealed surprise. The empress rarely paid personal visits to concubines, especially so soon after giving birth. But I had requested this audience specifically, had sent word that I wished to apologize for any misunderstanding. Consort Shen received me in her sitting room, reclining on cushions like a wilting flower. She wore pale pink robes that made her look ethereal and fragile, her hair arranged to artfully frame her delicate face. She had been crying. I could see the redness around her eyes, the careful placement of a handkerchief near her hand. Such a perfect performance. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have troubled yourself. You're still recovering." I had to come. I knelt beside her cushions, my posture humble. "Sister Shen, I owe you an apology. I've been told that my behavior frightened you, and that was never my intention." I watched her face carefully. She had expected many things: anger, accusations, perhaps even a cold formal apology delivered with imperial hauteur. She hadn't expected this. Genuine seeming remorse, a personal visit, the empress on her knees. "Your Majesty is too kind," she said, clearly thrown off balance. "I understand that childbirth is exhausting. The confusion is natural." "There was no confusion," I said gently, and I felt her stiffen. I knew exactly which child was mine. The crescent birthmark, you see. I noticed it immediately after the birth, even through my exhaustion. When I went to the nursery and saw 2 babies, I simply wanted to ensure my son was properly identified. I let that hang in the air for a moment. No accusation. Just a simple statement of fact. But the implication was there. "I knew what you tried to do." Consort Shen's fingers tightened on her handkerchief. "Of course. How observant of your Majesty. I'm sure the servants were simply being cautious, keeping both infants in the nursery for easier care. No other reason." "I'm sure," I agreed, my voice warm. "Though it's strange that they seemed so confused when I identified which child was mine. Almost as if they had been given different instructions." Her breathing had quickened slightly. "Good. Let her feel the ground shifting beneath her." "But that's not why I came," I continued, reaching out to take her hand. She flinched slightly at my touch but couldn't pull away without seeming rude. "I came because His Majesty told me how distressed you've been. How this whole situation has affected your health. Sister Shen, you've always been so kind to me. I would never want to cause you pain." "Your Majesty is too generous," she whispered. I could see her mind working, trying to understand my game. Was I truly apologizing? Was this genuine? Or was I setting some kind of trap? "I brought you a gift," I said, gesturing to Pinger, who stepped forward with a lacquered box. "Ginseng tea, personally blended by Grand Physician Zhao. He says it's excellent for new mothers, helps with clarity and strength. I thought since we both gave birth so close together, we could share this journey of recovery." I opened the box myself, showing her the carefully wrapped tea packets. "I've been drinking it every morning. It's made such a difference. My mind feels so clear now. So sharp. I remember everything with perfect detail." The emphasis on those last words was subtle, but I saw them land. Her face went a shade paler. "How thoughtful," she managed. "Your Majesty is truly too kind." "Not at all. We're family, aren't we? We should look after each other." I poured tea from the pot her servants had prepared, noting how her eyes tracked my movements. Was she wondering if I would drug her the way she had drugged me? "His Majesty has been so concerned about both of us. He wants harmony in the household. Peace. No disruptions." "His Majesty is wise," she said carefully. "He is." I sipped my tea, watching her over the rim of the cup. "He told me that personal feelings must be secondary to larger responsibilities. That the stability of the empire matters more than individual grievances." It was a good reminder. I saw relief flicker across her face. She thought she understood now. She thought the emperor had reined me in, reminded me of my place, convinced me to prioritize harmony over truth. She thought she had won. "Perfect. I'm glad your Majesty understands," she said, some of her confidence returning. We must all make sacrifices for the good of the empire. Sometimes that means overlooking small misunderstandings. Small misunderstandings, I repeated as if considering the phrase. Yes. Like servants who accidentally confuse which baby belongs to which mother. Like lotus soup that accidentally contains enough sedatives to cloud a new mother's memory. Like wet nurses who accidentally receive gold for their discretion. The color drained from her face completely now. Your Majesty, I don't. I'm not accusing you of anything, Sister Shen. My voice remained gentle, almost friendly. I'm simply acknowledging that misunderstandings happen. Accidents occur. And as His Majesty wisely said, we must all make sacrifices for harmony. I stood smoothing my robes. My sacrifice is this. I will speak no more of what happened in the nursery. I will accept His Majesty's counsel about maintaining peace. I will be the gracious Empress who overlooks these small misunderstandings. She was staring at me now, trying to reconcile this with the gentle, naive girl I had been. Your Majesty is most gracious. But Sister Shen, I continued, my voice dropping to something softer, more intimate. Sacrifices must be mutual. You understand this, don't you? If I am to maintain harmony by overlooking certain accidents, then there must be no more accidents. No more confusion. No more misunderstandings of any kind. Of course, Your Majesty. Good. I smiled and I made sure it didn't reach my eyes. Because the servants who were involved in that unfortunate confusion, they've provided detailed written accounts of exactly what happened. These accounts are safely stored. Not as accusations, you understand. Simply as documentation. In case there are ever any questions about the timeline of events. I watched her throat work as she swallowed. I see. I knew you would. You've always been so intelligent, Sister Shen. That's one of the things I've always admired about you. I moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and the ginseng tea. You try it. It's wonderful for mental clarity. I find that since I started drinking it, I remember everything with such perfect detail. Every conversation. Every instruction. Every single moment. I left her sitting there, pale and shaking, understanding exactly what I had done. I hadn't accused her. I hadn't threatened her. I had simply informed her that I knew everything, that I had proof, and that her safety depended entirely on her future behavior. I had turned the Emperor's own words about sacrifice and harmony into a leash around her neck. And I had done it all while appearing to be the gracious, forgiving Empress who sought only peace. As Pinger and I walked back through the palace corridors, she whispered, Your Majesty, that was necessary, I finished. She needs to know that I'm not the same person I was. That I won't be manipulated or drugged or deceived again. But she also needs to believe that I'm still playing by the Emperor's rules of harmony. That I won't expose her as long as she behaves. Will she behave? I thought of Consort Shen's face, the dawning horror in her eyes as she realized I had outmaneuvered her completely. For now, fear is an excellent teacher. She'll be cautious, careful. She'll watch every move, second-guess every plan. But eventually she'll make a mistake. I smiled, feeling the weight of 2 lifetimes settling into something sharp and purposeful. And when she does, I'll be ready. That night, I held Xiaoqin in my arms and whispered promises into his tiny ears. You will be strong, I told him, watching his small fists wave in the lamplight. You will be brilliant. You will be everything they tried to prevent you from becoming. In my previous life, he had grown up despised and discarded. The servants had been cruel to him, calling him unlucky, inauspicious. The Emperor had barely acknowledged his existence. Consort Shen had made sure every door was closed to him, every opportunity blocked. He had still become a skilled warrior, driven by desperate need to prove himself worthy of the family that rejected him. But he had been self-taught, scarred by abandonment, convinced he was somehow defective. This time would be different. Your Majesty? Pinger approached softly. A messenger from the Emperor. He requests your presence in the Hall of Supreme Harmony tomorrow morning. Yes, calling a formal family gathering. A family gathering. The first since both children were born. This would be where the Emperor officially announced the Crown Prince to the court, where the succession was formally acknowledged. In my previous life, I had stood there proudly presenting Crown Prince Wei, Consort Shen's son, to the assembled ministers and nobility. I had smiled as they praised his auspicious features, his strong lungs, his imperial bearing. I had never known I was celebrating the wrong child. This time I would present my real son. This time the world would know Zhao Chen's name. But the gathering would also be dangerous. Consort Shen would be there, surrounded by her allies. The ministers who favored her family. The court ladies who whispered in her favor. She might not dare move against me directly now that I had shown my hand, but she had other weapons. Pinger, I said slowly. I need you to do something for me. Anything, Your Majesty. Find out everything you can about the ministers who will attend tomorrow. Their alliances. Their debts. Their secrets. I need to know who might speak against my son's legitimacy and why. She bowed. This servant will have the information by dawn. After she left, I looked down at Zhao Chen again. He was sleeping now, peaceful and perfect. Innocent of the battles being fought around him. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry that you were born into this world of vipers. But I promise you this. They will not take your birthright again. They will not make you suffer for their ambitions. I died once learning these lessons, and I will not let that death be meaningless. He stirred slightly in his sleep, and I thought I saw the faintest smile cross his tiny face. In 15 years this child would become a general. A warrior. A legend. But first he would survive tomorrow's gathering. And I would make sure the entire empire knew exactly who he was. The Hall of Supreme Harmony gleamed in the morning light like a golden cage. I entered with Zhao Chen in my arms, dressed in full imperial regalia, the phoenix crown heavy on my head, robes embroidered with 9 phoenixes in gold thread, each stitch a reminder of my rank. I had learned in my previous life that power was half illusion and half will. Today I would embody both. The assembled ministers and nobility rose as I entered, their faces carefully neutral. I recognized them all, had memorized their loyalties, their weaknesses, their buried secrets thanks to Pinger's midnight intelligence gathering. Minister Wu, who owed Consort Shen's family a gambling debt of 3,000 taels. Lady Zhao, whose daughter had been passed over for selection as imperial concubine. General Feng, whose brother served in the border guard and desperately needed imperial favor for promotion. Each one a potential knife aimed at my son's back. The emperor sat on the dragon throne, resplendent in yellow silk, his expression carved from stone. Beside the throne, on a lower dais, Consort Shen reclined on cushions, her baby cradled by a wet nurse. She looked ethereal in pale rose silk, her eyes demurely downcast, the picture of delicate femininity. But I saw the tension in her shoulders. The way her fingers gripped her handkerchief. She had barely slept since my visit 3 days ago. I had made sure to receive reports of her pacing, her snappish commands to servants, the way she startled at every sound. Good. Let her be afraid. Fear made people careless. Empress Li, the emperor announced formally. You honor us with your presence. Please, present the crown prince to the assembled court. I walked forward with measured steps, every eye tracking my movement. In my previous life I had been nervous during this ceremony, fumbling with the formal words, worried about appearing inadequate. Now I moved with the certainty of someone who had already died and been reborn. Honored ministers, esteemed nobility, I said, my voice carrying through the vast hall. I present to you Crown Prince Zhao Chen, first son of His Majesty the Emperor, first son of the Empress, rightful heir to the dragon throne. The emphasis on first son of the Empress was deliberate, subtle but clear. Zhao Chen was my biological child, born of the principal wife. His legitimacy was absolute. I held him up for all to see, and the morning light caught the jade pendant at his throat, a ceremonial piece bearing the imperial seal. Grand Physician Zhao had examined him again this morning, confirming every identifying mark, adding the documentation to the growing file that proved beyond doubt which child was mine. The crown prince bears the auspicious crescent mark, I continued, gently turning Zhao Chen so the assembled court could see the birthmark beneath his left ear. A sign recognized by Grand Physician Zhao, who delivered him and documented all his features in the imperial archives. His identity is beyond question. A ripple of whispers moved through the hall. I had made the identification public, official, witnessed by dozens of the most powerful people in the empire. Any future attempt to swap or confuse the children would now require contradicting this public record. His Majesty's son is indeed blessed, came a smooth voice. Minister Wu stepped forward, his face arranged in diplomatic pleasantness. Though this humble servant must ask, there has been some confusion in the palace. Rumors of 2 infants in the imperial nursery. Perhaps your majesty could clarify for the court. But there was Consort Shin's first move, delivered through her puppet. He was asking me to explain publicly why there had been 2 babies, why I had needed to identify which was mine, creating an opening for implications of instability or paranoia. In my previous life I would have stumbled through an explanation making myself look foolish. Not anymore. Minister Wu's concern is appreciated, I said warmly. Yes, there were 2 infants in the nursery. Crown Prince Zhaoqin and noble consort Shin's son. This is standard practice when multiple births occur within hours of each other. The physicians prefer to keep the infants together for more efficient care in those first critical days. I smiled at Consort Shin, who had gone very still. Of course, some confusion arose among the servants about which child belonged to which mother. Understandable, given that newborns can look quite similar. That is precisely why Grand Physician Zhao conducted such thorough examinations and documentation. We cannot have any questions about the Crown Prince's identity, can we? The succession must be absolutely clear. Beautiful. I had acknowledged the 2 babies while making it seem like routine medical caution rather than evidence of attempted conspiracy. And I had thrown in a subtle jab. Confusion arose among the servants, without actually accusing anyone of deliberate action. Minister Wu's smile tightened. Most prudent, your majesty. And noble consort Shin's son? Has he also been properly documented? Of course, I said smoothly. Prince Zhao Wei has been examined and documented as well. Grand Physician Zhao maintains meticulous records of all imperial children. I watched Consort Shin's face pale at the name I had given her son. Zhao Wei. Not Crown Prince Wei as she had planned. Not the title that would have positioned him as heir. Just Prince Zhao Wei. A name that clearly identified him as an imperial prince, but not the crown prince. The distinction was everything. Your Majesty is wise to maintain such careful records, came another voice. Lady Zhao stepped forward, her expression sharp with barely concealed hostility. Though some might wonder why such precautions were necessary. Does your Majesty suspect treachery? There was the trap laid bare. If I accused Consort Shin publicly, I would look paranoid and vindictive. If I denied suspecting anything, I would look foolish for having demanded all the documentation and confessions. I met Lady Zhao's eyes and smiled. Treachery? Heavens no. I suspect the same thing all wise rulers suspect: human error. People make mistakes. Servants misunderstand instructions. In matters as important as imperial succession, we must guard against even innocent errors. Don't you agree, Lady Zhao? Her mouth opened and closed. I had turned her accusation into a statement about good governance rather than personal suspicion. She couldn't argue against that without seeming to favor carelessness in matters of succession. The Empress speaks wisely, the Emperor said, his voice cutting through the tension. The Crown Prince's identity has been properly established and documented. This matter is closed. I trust there will be no further questions or confusion. His eyes swept the assembly, lingering meaningfully on those who had spoken. The implicit threat was clear. Stop pushing this issue or face imperial displeasure. But Consort Shin wasn't finished. She rose slowly from her cushions, one hand pressed delicately to her chest as if her heart was troubling her. Your Majesty, she said in that breathy, fragile voice. Forgive this concubine's boldness, but I must speak. For the sake of harmony. Oh, she was good. Framing whatever poison she was about to deliver as concern for harmony, the Emperor's favorite principle. The confusion in the nursery has troubled me deeply, she continued, tears gathering in her eyes. Not because of any accusation, the Empress has been nothing but gracious to me, but because I worry about my son. If there was confusion, if servants were uncertain, what if some terrible mistake had been made? What if the wrong child had been taken to the wrong mother? A collective intake of breath from the assembly. She was being brilliant, actually. She wasn't accusing me of anything. She was simply voicing concern about the possibility of error, the same error I had supposedly been guarding against. But she was planting doubt in everyone's minds. What if the Empress was wrong? What if she had identified the wrong baby? What if her son was actually the one being raised in the other chambers? Noble consort Shin's concern is touching, I said, my voice gentle. It speaks to her maternal heart. However, as I mentioned, Grand Physician Zhao examined both children thoroughly. The identifying marks are clear and documented. Crown Prince Zhao Qin has the crescent birthmark beneath his left ear, along with several other distinctive features recorded in the imperial archives. Prince Zhao Wei has his own unique markings also documented. There is no possibility of confusion. But Your Majesty, she pressed, tears now streaming down her face. What if the birthmark was misidentified? What if in the exhaustion after giving birth, you thought you saw something that wasn't there? I'm not doubting you, I'm simply worried. For both our sons, perhaps both children should be examined again? By multiple physicians? To be absolutely certain. Clever. She was trying to create an opening for another swap by suggesting that the current identification might be wrong. If she could convince enough people that I was mistaken, she could push for a correction that would actually be the theft she had originally planned. Your Majesty, I said, turning to the Emperor. I appreciate noble consort Shin's concern. However, I must point out that questioning the identification now, after it has been publicly announced and documented, would create exactly the kind of instability we're trying to avoid. If we change our minds every few days about which child is which, how will the Empire have confidence in the succession? The Emperor nodded slowly. He understood political optics even if he was blind to emotional truth. Unless, I continued, my voice thoughtful, noble consort Shin is suggesting that Grand Physician Zhao, who has served 3 emperors with perfect integrity, made an error? Or perhaps she's suggesting that I, as the children's mother, cannot recognize my own son. I had cornered her beautifully. She couldn't accuse Grand Physician Zhao without insulting the most respected medical authority in the Empire. She couldn't accuse me without seeming to attack the Empress publicly. And she couldn't push for re-examination without admitting she didn't trust either of us. Of course not, she said quickly, realizing the trap. I would never suggest. I simply worry. My delicate heart cannot bear the thought of any child being separated from his true mother. Then we are in agreement, I said warmly. Both children are with their true mothers, properly identified and documented. Your maternal concern does you credit, Sister Shin. It shows how much you love your son. I hope you'll cherish every moment with Prince Zhao Wei. Children grow so quickly, don't they? The dismissal in my tone was subtle but unmistakable. Your son is Prince Zhao Wei. My son is Crown Prince Zhao Qin. That is how it will be now and forever. Consort Shin sank back onto her cushions, her face pale. She had tried to create doubt and failed. Worse, she had done it publicly, in front of witnesses who would remember this moment if she tried to change her story later. This audience is concluded, the Emperor announced. The Crown Prince has been formally presented. Let the records show that Crown Prince Zhao Qin, first son of Empress Li Yanmei, is the rightful heir to the Dragon Throne. The assembly bowed, the formal acknowledgement complete. I had won this battle. But as I carried Zhao Qin from the hall, I caught the look in Consort Shin's eyes. Not defeat. Not surrender. Calculation. She was already planning her next move. And this time she would be more careful. Good. Let her plan. Let her scheme. I had 15 years of future memories to draw from. I knew every move she would make before she made it. And I was no longer the gentle empress who could be outsmarted. I was the phoenix who had risen from her own ashes, and I would burn anyone who threatened my son. 3 months passed like a carefully orchestrated dance. I played the role of gracious empress perfectly, attending court functions with a serene smile, consulting with the emperor on matters of state, even sharing tea with Consort Shin while we both pretended the poisoned history between us didn't exist. To anyone watching, I was the picture of imperial harmony. But beneath the silk and ceremony, I was building an army. Not soldiers. Not yet. Something far more valuable. Information and alliances. Pinger had become my eyes and ears throughout the palace, cultivating relationships with servants in every household. I knew which ministers were gambling beyond their means, which concubines were secretly corresponding with their families, which officials were skimming from imperial projects. Knowledge was currency in this palace, and I was becoming wealthy. I also spent hours with Zhao Qin, though he was still an infant. I held him while reviewing military treatises, whispered battle strategies into his sleeping ears, surrounded him with maps and weapons as if my voice alone could imprint the knowledge he would need. Foolish perhaps. But in my previous life he had become a brilliant tactician despite having no formal training. This time he would have every advantage I could give him. It was during one of these sessions that General Liang Jiruo first entered my life. Or rather, re-entered it. In my previous life I had met him only briefly at formal military ceremonies. He had been one of the few who had treated my true son with respect, even when Zhao Qin was despised by the rest of the court. He had died defending the northern border, killed in an ambush that Consort Shin's family had orchestrated to remove one of the few military leaders who might have questioned Prince Wei's incompetent commands. I had mourned him in that life, though I barely knew him. Now, looking at him as he knelt in my reception hall, I saw him with new eyes. General Liang was perhaps 35, with the weathered face of someone who had spent more time on battlefields than in palaces. His armor was simple but immaculate, his posture military straight, his eyes sharp and assessing. Unlike the perfumed courtiers who filled the palace, he smelled of leather and steel and honest sweat. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice deep and steady. "This humble general thanks you for granting an audience." "General Liang." I gestured for him to rise. "Your victories at the northern border have been the subject of much praise. His Majesty speaks highly of your service. This general merely does his duty." His eyes flickered to where Zhao Qin lay sleeping in an ornate cradle nearby, surrounded by the military texts I had been studying. Something changed in his expression, surprise perhaps, or recognition. "You're wondering why the Empress studies battle formations while holding an infant," I said, not bothering to hide the books. "This general would never presume to question your Majesty's interests." Diplomatic answer. "But you are curious." I stood, moving to the table where I had been analyzing a particularly complex three-pronged attack strategy. "Tell me, General. What do you see here?" He approached cautiously, studied the maps and markers I had arranged. His eyebrows rose slightly. "This is an adaptation of the Dragon's Jaw formation, modified for terrain with limited water access. The timing of the auxiliary flanks would need to be precise, but..." He looked at me with new interest. "Your Majesty has military training. Let's say I've developed an interest in strategy." I couldn't tell him I had learned these formations by watching my son execute them brilliantly in another life, only to die because his half-brother's incompetence had left him without reinforcements. I believe that an empress should understand all aspects of governance, including defense. "Unusual," he said carefully. "But wise." "You're being diplomatic again, General. You mean to say it's inappropriate for a woman to study warfare?" "This, General, means that it's rare. And refreshing." He met my eyes directly, something few courtiers dared to do. Most of the nobles at court couldn't tell a flanking maneuver from a parade formation. They see war as something that happens far away, managed by disposable soldiers. They don't understand that the empire's survival depends on military strength. I felt something settle in my chest. Recognition. Here was someone who understood. Someone who valued substance over ceremony. "And yet you've been recalled from the border," I said. "Why?" His jaw tightened slightly. "The Minister of War believes the northern threat is contained. He has other priorities for military spending." Other priorities. I knew what that meant. In my previous life, Consort Shin's family had systematically weakened the border defenses, diverting funds to their own projects and placing incompetent relatives in key positions. It had nearly cost the empire everything. "The Minister of War is a fool," I said flatly. General Liang's eyes widened. Then slowly a smile crossed his face, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him. "Your Majesty speaks plainly. My position allows me certain freedoms." I moved closer, lowering my voice. "Tell me honestly, General. Is the northern border secure?" He hesitated, clearly weighing loyalty against truth. Finally he said, "No, Your Majesty. The barbarian tribes are regrouping. They've been acquiring weapons from somewhere. Good steel, not the crude iron they usually use. Someone is supplying them. Someone with resources. And the Minister of War ignores your reports. He says I'm overly cautious, that I'm inventing threats to maintain my position." Frustration leaked into his voice. "Your Majesty, this general has spent 15 years on that border. I know when something is wrong. The tribes are preparing for a major offensive, probably within 2 years. If we don't reinforce the garrisons now, the capital could fall. I finished his thought, remembering the desperate battles from my previous life. The northern invasion had come when Zhao Qian was 15, led by my son because no one else would go. He had won, but at terrible cost. This time we would be prepared. General Liang, I said carefully, I'm going to share something with you. Not as empress to subject, but as one person concerned about the empire's survival to another. Can you keep confidence? With my life, your majesty. I studied his face, looking for the deception I had become so skilled at detecting. I saw only steady certainty. In my previous life, this man had died rather than betray his principles. Could trust him. I believe you're right about the northern threat, I said. I also believe there are forces within the palace working against proper military preparedness. They profit from peace, even false peace, and they have the emperor's ear. You mean noble consort Shin's family? He said it matter-of-factly, no surprise in his voice. So he had already figured it out. Intelligent as well as honest. I mean certain noble families who prioritize their own enrichment over the empire's security, I said carefully. The challenge is convincing His Majesty without seeming to make accusations based on personal rivalry. Your Majesty wishes to strengthen the borders without directly opposing the Minister of War's assessment. I wish to ensure my son inherits an empire that still exists. I gestured toward Zhao Qian's cradle. Crown Prince Zhao Qian will one day need to understand military strategy, border defense, and the real threats facing our people. He will need advisors who value truth over politics. I let that hang in the air, watching General Liang's expression carefully. He was looking at the sleeping infant with an intensity that suggested he was seeing not just a baby but a future emperor. Your Majesty is thinking long-term, he said slowly. I'm thinking 15 years ahead. When my son is old enough to lead, will there be an empire left to lead? Or will we have fallen because the adults around him were too busy playing political games to defend what mattered? This general understands. He bowed deeply. What would your Majesty have me do? Here was the moment. The alliance I needed. In my previous life, General Liang had been sidelined, his talents wasted, until desperation made the court finally listen to him. By then it was almost too late. This time I would bind him to my son's future from the beginning. I want you to train the Crown Prince, I said. He blinked. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince is 3 months old. I know how old my son is, General. I smiled slightly. I'm not asking you to put a sword in his infant hands. I'm asking you to become his military advisor. To design a training program that will begin when he's old enough. To ensure that when Crown Prince Zhao Qian reaches manhood, he's the most strategically brilliant commander this empire has ever seen. This is highly irregular. The Crown Prince's education is typically overseen by the Grand Tutor and civilian scholars. And I will ensure he has the finest civilian education available. But General, I've studied enough history to know that emperors who understand only poetry and philosophy tend to lose their empires. My son will be different. He will be scholar and warrior both. Some would say such training is inappropriate. That it suggests your Majesty expects the Crown Prince to fight his own battles rather than commanding from the throne. Some would be idiots. I moved to stand beside the cradle, looking down at my sleeping son. I expect my son to understand every aspect of warfare so that when he commands, his soldiers don't die needlessly. So that when the northern barbarians come, and they will come, General, he'll know exactly how to defend his people. General Liang was quiet for a long moment. Then he knelt again, this time with his fist pressed to his chest in a military salute. This general would be honored to serve as Crown Prince Zhao Qian's military advisor. On one condition. Name it. That your Majesty allows this general to also serve as your personal military consultant. If the Empress is going to study strategy, she should learn from someone who's actually commanded armies, not just read about them in books. I felt a smile cross my face. A real one, not the calculated expressions I wore at court. You would teach an empress how to command troops? This general would teach a concerned mother how to ensure her son's empire survives long enough for him to inherit it. His eyes were warm but serious. Your Majesty is right. There are threats gathering. If the people who should be addressing those threats won't listen, then we must find another way. Even if it means defying the Minister of War? Even if it means operating outside traditional channels. Your Majesty, this general has spent 15 years watching competent soldiers die because of incompetent leadership. If you're offering a chance to change that, I'll risk any amount of political displeasure. I extended my hand in the traditional gesture of alliance, and after a moment's surprise, General Liang clasped it. His grip was strong, his palm calloused from weapon use, so different from the soft, perfumed hands of courtiers. Then we have an accord, General. You'll train my son and advise me. In return, I'll work to strengthen border defenses through whatever means necessary. Even if that means circumventing official channels. Your Majesty is suggesting using imperial discretionary funds. I'm suggesting that the Empress has certain resources at her disposal that don't require the Minister of War's approval. Resources that could quietly find their way to properly maintaining border garrisons. His expression showed understanding and approval. That would be highly irregular. And completely necessary. Welcome to my world, General Liang. Where everything is irregular because the regular channels are corrupted. After he left, I stood at the window watching him cross the courtyard. He moved like a weapon himself. Efficient, purposeful, dangerous. In my previous life he had been one of the few genuinely honorable men in this palace, and they had killed him for it. Not this time. This time I would keep him alive. I would make him my son's teacher, my advisor, and eventually, though he didn't know it yet, something more. Because I had learned another lesson in death. Power wasn't just about manipulation and information. Sometimes, power came from finding the few people you could actually trust and binding them to your cause so tightly that nothing could break the alliance. General Liang would teach my son to be a warrior. And I would ensure that when the battles came, and they would come, we would all be ready. The years passed like water through my fingers, each one bringing new challenges and small victories. Zhao Qin grew strong and quick, his infant softness giving way to a lean, sharp intelligence that sometimes startled even me. By age 5 he could recite military formations while other noble children were still learning basic characters. By 7 he was studying maps with General Liang, asking questions that made the battle-hardened warrior pause and reconsider his answers. Your son has the mind of a strategist, General Liang told me one afternoon as we watched Zhao Qin arrange toy soldiers on a sand table, recreating a famous historical battle. He sees patterns others miss. Anticipates moves 3 steps ahead. He gets that from his father, I said, then corrected myself. Or perhaps from his mother who studied too many military texts. The general smiled, that rare, genuine expression he reserved for moments when we were alone, when the masks of court could slip away. Over the years, our relationship had evolved beyond advisor and empress. We had become allies, friends, and recently, something neither of us had quite named yet. He never overstepped. Never presumed. But I felt it in the way his eyes lingered when he thought I wasn't looking. In the careful distance he maintained, as if afraid that standing too close might burn us both. I felt it too. This pull toward someone who saw me not as a decorative empress or a political piece, but as a person with thoughts and plans and the will to see them through. But I couldn't afford such distractions yet. Not while Consort Shen still circled like a shark scenting blood. She had been quiet these past years, too quiet. Her son, Prince Zhao Wei, had been raised in her household with all the privileges of an imperial prince but none of the succession rights. I had been careful to ensure he was well treated, properly educated, and given opportunities to prove himself in safe, limited ways. Not out of kindness to Consort Shen. Out of strategy. If I appeared cruel to the child, the emperor would intervene. If I treated him poorly, it would give Consort Shen ammunition for accusations of jealousy and vindictiveness. So instead I was gracious, appropriate, and carefully ensured that Prince Wei remained visible as exactly what he was. A secondary prince, cherished but not essential. It drove Consort Shen to distraction. I saw it in the tightness around her eyes, the way her smile became more strained each year as Zhao Qin grew more impressive while her own son remained merely adequate. Prince Wei was a sweet boy actually. Not brilliant, not particularly ambitious, but kind-hearted in a way that suggested he had escaped his mother's poisonous influence. In my previous life she had twisted him into something cruel and entitled. This time, deprived of the crown prince position, he had developed differently. Sometimes I wondered if I had saved him as much as I had saved my own son. But Consort Shen, she was wounded and dangerous. A predator who had failed to make her kill and now watched her prey grow stronger every day. The strike came on the eve of Zhao Chen's 10th birthday. I was reviewing military supply reports with General Liang. We had successfully diverted significant imperial funds to strengthen the northern garrisons over the years, all while maintaining the appearance of simple household management. When Pinger burst into my chambers, her face white with panic. "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince, there's been an accident in the training yard." My blood turned to ice. I was on my feet and running before conscious thought caught up. General Liang's heavy footsteps right behind me. The training yard was in chaos. Servants clustered around something on the ground, their voices high with panic. I shoved through them and saw Zhao Chen lying motionless on the packed earth, blood streaming from a gash on his temple. His practice sword lay several feet away, the wooden blade splintered. Above him, one of the training dummies had collapsed from its stand, the heavy wooden structure that should have been secured properly. "Get Grand Physician Zhao." I dropped to my knees beside my son, my hands shaking as I checked his breathing. Shallow but steady. His pulse fluttered beneath my fingers like a trapped bird. "Your Majesty, please." One of the training masters was wringing his hands. It happened so quickly. The Crown Prince was practicing the forms General Liang taught him, and suddenly the dummy just collapsed. The stand gave way. "We don't understand how." "Show me the stand," General Liang commanded, his voice sharp as a blade. While servants carried my unconscious son to his chambers, General Liang and I examined the collapsed equipment. It took him less than a minute to find what I had already suspected. "Here." He pointed to the wooden support beam. "See where it's been cut? Nearly through, then painted over to hide the damage. It was made to collapse under weight and stress." "Sabotage," I said flatly. "Someone wanted the Crown Prince injured. Or worse." His expression was grim. "Your Majesty, this was attempted murder." I looked at the training yard, empty except for us now that everyone had rushed to attend Zhao Chen. This equipment was used only by my son. Only he trained here with General Liang, away from the other royal children who might accidentally hurt him or be hurt by his increasingly advanced techniques. Someone had known his schedule, known where he would be, known exactly how to make it look like a tragic accident. "Consort Shen," I breathed. "We can't prove it." "Not yet." General Liang's jaw was tight with anger. "But Your Majesty, this is escalation. If she's willing to harm the Crown Prince directly, then nothing is safe anymore." I looked toward the palace where my son lay bleeding. She's been watching and waiting for 7 years. 7 years of watching her son fade into irrelevance while mine shines brighter. She's desperate now. Desperate people are the most dangerous. Grand Physician Zhao was already at work when I reached Zhao Chen's chambers. My son lay pale and still on his bed, the gash on his temple cleaned and bandaged. The physician's face was grave. "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince has a significant head injury. He's unconscious but breathing steadily. The next few hours will tell us whether there's damage to the brain. We must watch him carefully. I'll stay with him." I took my son's small hand, so much like mine, so much stronger than it had been as an infant. "I'm not leaving his side. Your Majesty should rest." "I'm not leaving." The physician bowed and withdrew, leaving me alone with Zhao Chen. I sat beside him as afternoon turned to evening, then evening to night, holding his hand and whispering promises. "You will survive this," I told him. "You survived worse in another life. You will wake up and you will be fine, and I will make absolutely certain nothing like this ever happens again." Around midnight the Emperor finally arrived, his robes hastily arranged. He looked at his unconscious son with what might have been genuine concern. Sometimes I forgot he was capable of that emotion. "How is he?" he asked quietly. "Unconscious. Grand Physician Zhao says the next hours are critical." I didn't look at him, keeping my eyes on Zhao Chen's pale face. The training equipment collapsed. It had been deliberately sabotaged. The Emperor went still. "You're certain?" General Liang found where the support beam was cut and painted over. "This wasn't an accident, Your Majesty. This was attempted murder." "Impossible. Who would dare? Who benefits from the Crown Prince's death?" I kept my voice even, though rage burned in my chest like swallowed fire. Who has watched their own son's prospects diminish as mine has thrived? Who has motive, opportunity, and a history of treachery? Yen Mei. His voice carried a warning. "You're making serious accusations." "I'm stating facts." I finally looked at him and I let him see the fury in my eyes. Someone tried to kill our son. The evidence is clear. Are you going to investigate or are you going to tell me to maintain harmony? He flinched slightly at the bitterness in my tone. You think I don't care about my son's safety? I think you care about stability more than truth. I think you'll find reasons to dismiss the evidence because acting on it would disrupt your carefully balanced household. I turned back to Zhaochen. Prove me wrong. The emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll order an investigation. But Yenmei, if you're wrong about who did this. I'm not wrong. I had died once already knowing exactly how far consortium would go. But investigate. Question everyone. Look at the evidence. Just promise me you'll actually see what's in front of you instead of what you wish was there. He left without answering, which was answer enough. Zhaochen woke 3 days later, groggy and confused but alive. The relief that flooded through me was so intense it nearly brought me to my knees. He would recover. Grand Physician Zhao assured me there would be no lasting damage, though he would need weeks of rest. The investigation yielded exactly what I expected. Inconclusive results. The equipment had indeed been sabotaged, but no one could prove who had done it. The training master swore everything had been secure when he last checked. The servants claimed they had seen nothing unusual. And consortium? She wept beautifully when questioned, horrified that anyone would suggest she could harm a child. Her alibis were perfect. She had been in her chambers receiving embroidery lessons at the time of the incident, surrounded by witnesses. Of course she had been. She had learned long ago never to do her own dirty work. The emperor declared the matter under investigation, and urged everyone to move forward with caution. Which meant exactly nothing would happen. But something had changed. I could feel it in the air, see it in the way ministers looked at me, hear it in the whispers that followed me through the palace corridors. The empress who had been patient for 7 years was finally angry. And people were starting to realize that an angry empress with military connections and detailed knowledge of everyone's secrets was perhaps more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. General Liang increased security around Zhao Chen's training, personally vetting every servant, every piece of equipment, every person who came near the crown prince. He also began teaching my son not just strategy but practical combat skills. If someone tries to harm him again, the general said grimly, the crown prince should be able to defend himself. Zhao Chen recovered from his injuries, but something had changed in him too. He was quieter now, more watchful. He had learned the lesson I had hoped to spare him a few more years. The palace was a battlefield and everyone was a potential enemy. One evening about a month after the incident he came to my chambers and climbed onto my lap despite being nearly too big for such gestures. Mother, he said quietly. The training accident wasn't an accident, was it? I could have lied. Protected his innocence a little longer. But I had learned in my previous life that ignorance was the most dangerous vulnerability of all. No, I said simply. It wasn't. Someone tried to kill me because I'm crown prince. Yes. He was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then, was it consort Shin? Smart boy. Too smart perhaps. We can't prove it. But yes, I believe so. Because she wanted her son to be crown prince instead. Yes. Another long silence. Then Zhao Chen looked up at me with eyes that seemed far too old for his face. Mother, will she try again? Probably. I wouldn't lie to him. Not about this. But I'll be ready. General Liang will be ready. And you'll learn to be ready too. I don't want to die, he whispered. You won't. I held him tighter, this child I had been given a second chance to save. I promise you, Zhao Chen. You will live. You will grow strong. And one day you'll be the emperor this realm deserves. No one, not consortium, not anyone, will take that from you. He nodded against my shoulder and I felt his small body relax slightly. Trust. He trusted me to keep him safe. I would not fail him again. That night, after Zhao Chen was asleep, I sat in my private study and made a decision. 7 years of patience, 7 years of careful political maneuvering, 7 years of playing by the emperor's rules of harmony. It hadn't been enough. Consortium was still dangerous. Still scheming. Still willing to murder a child to achieve her goals. The time for patience was over. The time for war had begun. I pulled out the hidden compartment in my desk where I had stored 7 years of accumulated secrets. The confessions from the baby-swapping conspiracy, Evidence of the drugged Lotus soup, financial records of bribes paid to ministers, documentation of diverted military funds by Consort Shin's family, witnesses to dozens of smaller treacheries. I also had something new. A network of loyal servants, military officers who owed their positions to my quiet interventions, ministers whose gambling debts I had quietly paid in exchange for their political support, and General Liang, a man whose loyalty was absolute and whose military command made him perhaps the most powerful person in the empire besides the emperor himself. Consort Shin had been building her power for years. She didn't know I had been building mine too. I began writing letters. To key ministers. To military commanders. To provincial governors who remembered that the Empress's family had once held significant power before I married into the imperial household. I was calling in every favor, activating every alliance, preparing every weapon I had spent 7 years forging. Because Consort Shin had made a critical mistake when she tried to kill my son. She had reminded me that in this world of silk and ceremony, beneath the poetry and tea ceremonies, we were all still animals fighting for survival. And she had forgotten that the most dangerous animal was always the mother protecting her child. This palace had seen 7 years of careful, cold strategy. It was about to see what happened when strategy became war. 5 years later, I stood on the palace balcony watching the sunrise paint the capital in shades of gold and crimson. 15 years had passed since my rebirth. 15 years since I had opened my eyes in a younger body with the bitter knowledge of betrayal and poison still burning in my throat. Everything had changed. And yet, everything was exactly as I had planned. Below me in the grand courtyard, Crown Prince Zhao Qin led the morning military drills. At 15 he was already taller than most men, his body lean and powerful from years of training with General Liang. He moved through sword forms with a grace that made watching him feel like watching water flow. Effortless, inevitable, deadly. The assembled soldiers followed his commands without hesitation. They had learned, as everyone in the capital had learned, that the crown prince was not merely a ceremonial figure. He was a warrior, a strategist, and increasingly the true power behind the throne. "Your Majesty looks satisfied," came a warm voice behind me. I didn't turn but I smiled. "General Liang, you're early for our meeting." I wanted to watch the crown prince's morning drills. He moved to stand beside me, carefully maintaining the proper distance even though we were alone. Always proper. Always honorable. It was one of the things I loved most about him. Yes. I could admit it now even if only to myself. "He's magnificent," General Liang continued, pride evident in his voice. "In all my years of military service, I've never seen a 15-year-old with such natural command presence." The soldiers would follow him into hell itself. "They may have to," I said quietly. "The northern tribes have been quiet for too long. Your scouts report they're massing near the border again." "They are. But this time we're ready." He glanced at me. "Thanks to your Majesty's careful management of resources over the past decade." Careful management. Such diplomatic words for what had actually been a systematic dismantling of Consort Shin's family power and a complete restructuring of military funding. It had taken 5 years after the assassination attempt, but I had finally gathered enough evidence, enough allies, enough raw political power to move openly against her. The confessions from the baby-swapping conspiracy, carefully preserved and authenticated, had been my opening move. Then came the financial records showing her family's embezzlement. Then the testimony of servants she had thought cowed into permanent silence. The emperor had resisted at first, of course, defending his delicate concubine, calling me vindictive. But I had learned patience in death and I had been patient in execution. Each piece of evidence was irrefutable. Each accusation was supported by multiple witnesses. Each revelation was timed to maximize impact. And when the evidence of the assassination attempt finally came to light, a servant who had been paid to sabotage the training equipment, who had been promised wealth and protection that never materialized, who finally broke under the weight of her guilt, even the emperor could no longer ignore the truth. Consort Shin had been stripped of her titles 3 years ago. Not executed. I had argued against that, knowing it would make her a martyr. Instead, she had been sent to a remote Buddhist temple to reflect on her sins and seek enlightenment. A comfortable prison perhaps, but still a prison. I saw her once before she left, brought before me in plain robes with her hair unadorned. She looked like what she truly was. A woman who had gambled everything and lost. You've won, she had said, her voice empty of the musical sweetness she had always affected. Are you satisfied, Yenmei? I'm satisfied that my son is safe, I had replied. I'm satisfied that you can no longer hurt anyone. Whether that constitutes winning, I suppose history will decide. History will remember you as the jealous empress who destroyed her rival. Perhaps. Or perhaps history will remember me as the mother who protected her child from a would-be murderer. I had leaned closer, letting her see the steel beneath my silk. Either way, I'll still be here, alive and powerful. And you'll be in a temple forgotten. I can live with that trade. She had been escorted away and I had felt nothing. No triumph. No vindication. Just a quiet relief that the threat was finally neutralized. Prince Zhao Wei had been placed in my household officially after his mother's exile. The boy was 14 now, and contrary to what one might expect, he seemed almost relieved. Away from his mother's poisonous influence, he had flourished in his own way, not as a warrior like Zhao Qin but as a scholar and diplomat. He was good with people, empathetic in a way that served the empire well. I had been careful to treat him kindly, to give him purpose and value. He knew the truth about his mother now. I had told him myself when he was old enough to understand. He had wept, apologized for sins that were never his, and pledged his loyalty to his brother. Zhao Qin had accepted that loyalty with grace. The two boys were not exactly friends, but they worked well together. The warrior and the diplomat. It was a powerful combination. Your Majesty, General Liang said, breaking into my thoughts. There's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. His tone was different, uncertain in a way he rarely was. I turned to look at him properly, noting the unusual tension in his shoulders. The northern campaign will likely launch within the year, he continued. Crown Prince Zhao Qin has already requested permission to lead the forces personally. His Majesty is considering it. My heart clenched. This was the moment I had been dreading and preparing for simultaneously. In my previous life, Zhao Qin had led that campaign too, had won brilliantly, and had been betrayed by his supposed brother who had withheld reinforcements. This time would be different. This time Prince Wei was loyal. This time the military was properly supplied and led by competent commanders I had personally vetted. This time my son would return victorious and alive. He should go, I said, though every maternal instinct screamed against it. He's ready. And he needs to prove himself to the Empire on his own terms, not just as my son or your student. I agree. But Your Majesty. General Liang hesitated again, then seemed to gather his courage. I wanted to ask your permission for something. Before I leave with the Crown Prince for the campaign. You have my permission for anything, General. You know that. Not anything. He turned to face me fully and I saw something in his eyes that made my breath catch. Your Majesty, I know I have no right. I know my position, my status, everything about our situations makes this inappropriate. But I've served you for 15 years. I've watched you transform from a grieving new mother into the most formidable political mind in this empire. I've seen your strength, your intelligence, your ruthless devotion to protecting what matters. He took a breath. And somewhere in those 15 years I fell in love with you. The words hung in the air between us like suspended lightning. I'm not asking for anything, he continued quickly. I know the Emperor still lives. I know you're the Empress. I know any relationship between us would be impossible, perhaps treasonous. I simply needed you to know before I leave for a campaign I might not return from. You should know that someone sees you. All of you. Not the crown or the title or the political power. Just you. I stood frozen, my carefully maintained control cracking. In 15 years, I had become adept at hiding my emotions, at calculating every word and gesture. But this honest, impossible declaration shattered every defense I had built. Liang Zhiruo, I said softly, using his personal name for the first time. You foolish, honorable, impossible man. I know, Your Majesty. I apologize if I've overstepped. I fell in love with you 7 years ago, I interrupted. When you agreed to train my son without question. When you believed me about the northern threats when no one else would. When you looked at me like I was a person worth respecting instead of a decorative piece on the Emperor's board. His eyes widened. Your Majesty. Yenmei, I corrected. When we're alone, call me Yenmei. We've earned at least that much honesty between us. Yenmei. He said my name like a prayer. What are we going to do? Nothing. The word hurt to say, but it was true. The emperor is not a bad man, just a weak one. And I'm still the empress. We cannot act on this. Not now. Perhaps not ever. I know. His expression was anguished but accepting. I've known from the beginning. It doesn't change what I feel. It doesn't change what I feel either. I allowed myself one moment of weakness. I reached out and touched his hand just briefly, feeling the warmth and calluses and strength there. But we both know duty. We both understand sacrifice. This is just one more thing we sacrifice for the empire we're trying to save. After the campaign, he said slowly, if I survive, if Crown Prince Zhaoqin establishes himself as the undisputed heir, if the empire is stable and secure, perhaps then. I couldn't promise more than that. Couldn't let myself hope too hard. Go north with my son. Keep him safe. Win the war that's coming. And come back alive, Zhao. That's the only thing I'm asking of you. I will. He raised my hand, the one that had briefly touched his, and pressed his forehead to it in a gesture that was not quite a kiss but infinitely more intimate. I swear it on my life. I will bring your son home victorious and I will return to you. He stepped back, restoring the proper distance, his face once again the professional mask of the imperial general. But I had seen beneath it now. I had said the words out loud. And somehow that made the impossible situation almost bearable. The day Zhaoqin left for the northern campaign, the entire capital turned out to see the crown prince ride at the head of his army. He looked magnificent in his armor, the dragon emblem of the imperial heir emblazoned across his chest. General Liang rode at his right hand and Prince Wei had insisted on coming too, not as a warrior, but as a diplomat who might negotiate terms if victory made such negotiations possible. I watched from the palace walls as my son, the child I had died and been reborn to save, rode toward his destiny. The emperor stood beside me, his expression unreadable. We had not been close in years. The revelation of Consort Shin's treachery had damaged something fundamental in our relationship. He had chosen her over truth too many times, and I had stopped trying to make him see clearly. But he loved his son in his way. That much was real. He'll be fine, the emperor said as if trying to convince himself. He has the best training, the best troops, the best commanders. He has himself, I replied. That's more than enough. The emperor glanced at me. You've turned him into something remarkable, Yanmei. I didn't understand what you were doing all those years. The military training, the strategic studies, the way you managed every detail of his education. I thought you were being overprotective. Paranoid. I was protecting him from the reality you refused to see. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Consort Shin tried to have our son killed. I should have believed you sooner. I should have investigated properly after the training accident. I should have. Yes, I interrupted. You should have. But you chose harmony over truth. Comfort over justice. And it nearly cost Zhaoqin his life. The emperor flinched but didn't argue. What could he say? We both knew it was true. When he returns victorious, the emperor said slowly, I'm going to officially name you Empress Dowager. Retire to focus on my health and spiritual pursuits. Zhaoqin can begin serving as regent with your guidance. He'll be ready to rule fully by 18. I turned to stare at him. You're abdicating? I'm acknowledging reality. He smiled sadly. You and Zhaoqin have been running this empire for years already. You've rebuilt the military, restructured the treasury, created alliances with half the provincial governors. I've been decorative. A figurehead you've allowed to believe he still holds power. Your Majesty. It's not an accusation, Yanmei. It's recognition. You've been a better emperor than I ever was. You just couldn't wear the crown. He looked out at the departing army. So I'm going to make sure your son wears it soon. While he's young enough to rule for decades. While the empire you've built can flourish under proper leadership. I didn't know what to say. In my previous life, the emperor had clung to power until the very end, making disastrous decisions that had nearly destroyed the realm. This Zhao Yunshao, shaped by different circumstances, had apparently learned wisdom. Thank you, I said finally. Don't thank me. I'm just finally doing what I should have done years ago, trusting the person who actually deserves it. The northern campaign lasted 11 months. 11 months of worry, of pacing palace corridors, of reading reports with hands that shook no matter how much I tried to control them, 11 months of nightmares where I watched my son fall in battle, where General Liang didn't return, where everything I had worked for turned to ash. But then on a spring morning when the cherry blossoms were painting the capital pink and white, the scouts reported victory. The Crown Prince had shattered the Northern Coalition, driven the barbarian tribes back beyond the frontier, and negotiated a peace treaty that would hold for at least a generation. He was coming home. I was on the palace walls when the army returned. Zhao Qin rode at the head of his troops, his armor dented and scarred but his posture proud and strong. The people lined the streets cheering, throwing flowers, shouting his name. Crown Prince Zhao Qin. The warrior prince. The phoenix's son. My son. General Liang rode beside him, alive and whole and looking up at the palace walls where he knew I would be waiting. Our eyes met across the distance, and even though we were too far apart to speak, I felt his message clearly. I kept my promise. I brought him home. I came back to you. That night there was a grand banquet celebrating the victory. Zhao Qin received honors and accolades, his military achievements recounted in elaborate detail. He accepted everything with grace and humility, but I saw the weariness beneath his composure. He had seen war now. Had killed men. Had watched soldiers under his command die. He had paid the price of leadership. Later, when the festivities died down, he came to my chambers and collapsed into my arms the way he had when he was small. "Mother," he said quietly. "I was so afraid. Not of dying. Of failing you. Of failing the empire you'd built. Of proving that all your faith in me was misplaced. You could never fail me," I whispered into his hair. "You've already exceeded every hope I ever had. You survived. You won. You came home. That's all I ever wanted." "General Liang told me something during the campaign," Zhao Qin continued. "He said you'd been given a second chance at something once. That you'd taken that chance and used it to change everything. I didn't understand what he meant, but I felt like I should. Like there was something important I was missing." I tensed slightly. General Liang knew I had secrets. We all did. But I had never told him about my death and rebirth. How could I? It was too impossible, too strange. "He meant that I was given the chance to be your mother," I said carefully. "And I chose to be the best mother I could be. To protect you. To prepare you. To make sure you became everything you were meant to be." It wasn't exactly a lie. Zhao Qin pulled back to look at me, his eyes so much like mine, searching my face. "Whatever choices you made, whatever you did to bring us here. Thank you, Mother. I know it wasn't easy. I know you fought battles I never saw. But I'm here. I'm alive. I'm victorious. And it's because of you." I pulled him close again, this child I had died for and been reborn to save. "You did this yourself, Chinner. Your courage. Your skill. Your heart. I just gave you the tools. You wielded them." 3 years later, Zhao Qin was crowned emperor at age 18. The ceremony was magnificent. All gold and crimson, incense and ceremony, the assembled nobility of the empire bowing before my son as he took his place on the dragon throne. The Emperor Emeritus, as Zhao Yunshao now styled himself, had officially abdicated 6 months earlier, true to his word. He spent his days in a quiet palace garden, painting and writing poetry and seemingly content to be free of the burden he had never been suited to carry. I stood beside the throne as Empress Dowager, the most powerful woman in the empire, and everyone knew it. I had spent 18 years building this moment brick by careful brick. The military was strong, the treasury full, the borders secure. The ministers were competent and loyal. The people loved their young warrior emperor who had proven himself in battle. Everything was perfect. Almost everything. General Liang stood among the military commanders, his expression properly formal for the ceremony. But when our eyes met, I saw the question there. The same question that had been hanging between us for 3 years. Perhaps now. The Emperor Emeritus had abdicated. I was technically free to remarry if I chose. Empress Dowagers had that privilege once the succession was secure. Zhao Qin was emperor, established and beloved. The empire was stable. All the reasons we had given ourselves to wait were gone. That night, after the ceremonies ended, I walked in the palace gardens alone. Or I thought I was alone until I heard footsteps behind me. "Your Majesty," General Liang said formally, because guards might be listening. "You shouldn't be out here unescorted." "I wanted to see the stars," I replied, equally formal. "They're clearer tonight than I've seen them in years." We walked in silence for a few moments, maintaining proper distance. Then he spoke again, his voice lower. 18 years, Yenmei. 18 years since you first asked me to train your son. 15 years since I told you I loved you. I remember. The war is won. The crown prince, the emperor now, is established. The empire is secure. All our reasons for waiting are gone. I know. So I'm asking again. Perhaps now. I stopped walking and turned to face him fully. This man who had been my ally, my advisor, my friend, my secret love for so many years. His face was more weathered now, marked by battles and time, but his eyes held the same steady honor that had first made me trust him. Yes, I said simply. Now. His expression transformed, joy breaking through the formal mask he wore so well. Your Majesty. Yenmei, I corrected, stepping closer. My name is Yenmei, and I've waited 18 years for this. I'm not waiting any longer. He closed the distance between us and kissed me, finally, properly, without pretense or hiding. It tasted like victory and promise and all the years we had denied ourselves for duty's sake. When we finally pulled apart, I was laughing, giddy with relief and happiness in a way I hadn't felt since before my first death. We'll have to tell Zhaochen, I said. He already knows. He's known for years. General Liang smiled. He cornered me after the coronation. Said that if I didn't finally ask his mother to marry me, he was going to issue an imperial decree forcing the matter. Apparently watching us dance around each other for 15 years has been painful and absurd. His exact words. I laughed harder. Smart boy. He learned from the best. General Liang took my hands. Marry me, Yenmei. Not because it's politically convenient. Not because the empire requires it. But because I've loved you for 15 years and I want to spend whatever time we have left not hiding it anymore. Yes, I said again. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to everything. I married General Liang 3 months later in a quiet ceremony attended by close family and friends. Zhaochen gave me away with tears in his eyes, whispering that he was proud of me for finally choosing my own happiness. Prince Zhao Wei stood as witness, his expression genuinely happy for the brother who had shown him kindness when cruelty would have been expected. The Emperor Emeritus sent his blessings from his garden retreat, his message simple. I was never the husband you deserved. I hope he is. And consort Shen. She remained in her temple, forgotten by everyone except historians who would record her as a cautionary tale about ambition and treachery. I thought about her sometimes, wondered if she understood yet that she had been defeated not by force but by something simpler. Love. Love for my son had made me stronger than her ambition ever could. Love had given me patience when she had only desperation. Love had taught me to build rather than just destroy. On my wedding night, as I lay beside the man I had loved in secret for 15 years, I thought about the life I had lived before. The gentle, trusting empress who had been betrayed and murdered. The woman who had died not knowing her own son's face. She had given me this second chance through her suffering. Her death had been my rebirth. What are you thinking about? Liang asked, his arm warm around me. About how strange life is, I said. How sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. How pain can teach us to be stronger than we ever thought possible. Regrets? None. And it was true. Every hardship, every sacrifice, every careful manipulation and political battle had led here. To my son on the throne. To peace and prosperity. To love freely given and freely received. The empire will remember you, Liang said softly. Not just as Empress Dowager but as the woman who rebuilt the military, reformed the treasury, secured the borders. They'll tell stories about you for generations. Let them tell whatever stories they want, I said, turning into his embrace. I know the truth. I was just a mother who refused to let her son be destroyed by people who valued power over love. Everything else came from that. Just a mother, he repeated with a smile. The most dangerous force in the empire. I laughed and kissed him, feeling happy in a way I had forgotten was possible. Outside, the palace slept peacefully. The empire was secure. My son ruled with wisdom and strength. The enemies who had tried to destroy us were defeated or forgotten. And I, the empress who had died and been reborn, who had fought battles in silk and ceremony rather than steel, who had transformed grief into power and loss into victory, I was finally truly free. The phoenix had burned. The phoenix had risen. And now at last the phoenix could rest. But only for a little while. Because somewhere in the northern provinces, new threats were stirring. Because peace was always temporary. Because an empire required constant vigilance and love required constant courage. And I had both in abundance. This life, my second chance, wasn't over yet. There were still battles to fight, still challenges to face, still moments where I would need to be steel wrapped in silk. But this time I wouldn't face them alone. This time I had my son beside me, brilliant and strong in everything I had hoped he would become. This time I had love that didn't demand I hide or diminish myself. This time I had learned that true power came not from crowns or titles, but from knowing yourself completely and refusing to apologize for it. I had been given a second chance at life and I had used it to rewrite fate itself. That was enough. That was everything. And as I drifted to sleep in my husband's arms in a palace at peace, with my son ruling wisely and well, I whispered a final promise to the woman I had been, the one who had died so I could live. Thank you for your sacrifice. I made it mean something. I made it matter. Your death gave me the strength to ensure your son would never suffer as he did before. Rest now. We're safe. We won. We survived. Tell me which moment shocked you the most or touched your heart the deepest. I'd like to see your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe and share, it helps me keep creating more stories like this. Your support keeps Lotus Tale Studios alive. See you in the next story.